Good afternoon, this Township of Selwyn regular council meeting of June the 10th, 2025 will come to order. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Please observe a moment of silence so the council, staff, and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. I would ask that all comments, questions, and answers be directed through me as the chair. This includes the public, staff, and council members. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, please have that noted in the minutes. We have our minutes of May the 27th, 2025 before us. Has everybody had a chance to read them over? If there was no errors or omissions, can I have a motion to receive them? Moved by Councillor Boyko, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is there any discussion out of the minutes? Seeing none, we have our deputation this afternoon is Doug Boa. Doug, if you'd like to go to the microphone, give us your address while you're there and welcome.
Hi there. My name is Doug Boa and I live at 1739 6 Line Selwyn. First of all, there are about 10 100-foot plus tall trees that are unsafe and have to be cut. The township marked 5 big ones similar and the contractor Dunford cut them down from my property. The township cut about 10 smaller and dead ones prior to that from the road. These are not the hydro's responsibility, or are they any closer to the hydro lines than the other ones were? Broken, hanging, big branches, widowmakers. So at least cut the maples on either side of my driveway. Their leaves plug that culvert every year. I kept it clean, removing leaves annually. 45 years. Can I pay an arborist take down some of these trees, or because they're going to do more damage to my property? So they got to go one way or another. They're coming down by themselves. All right. Secondly, the culvert in my driveway is half full of sand and gravel. I live at the bottom of the hill, and the lower side is below grade of the ditch by about a foot. There's no place for the water to go. The upper side of the culvert is about 1.5 feet below the bottom of the ditch. It plugs up with leaves easily. I talked in person with the road coordinator, not sure of his name, and he looked at it and he said that he would clean the ditch before and after the culvert. They didn't. The culvert is at the bottom of a long hill. Are they going to do that? Now the ditch on the other uphill neighbor is full of wood and brush. They didn't pick it up when they did the rest of the road. If that one plugs, the water is going to come right down across my lawn. So I don't know what you're supposed to do with that. I tried to communicate with Adam Tobin, Jennifer, and the road foreman, but Brandon was very helpful and Angela was very helpful. Thank you.
Right, so Adam, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Boa. Scott, our road supervisor, was on your property and did look at some of the trees. I think he was concerned, or you're concerned originally with the dead ash trees that were to the east of your property, which have been identified and they're on the list to take down. But we do have a pretty extensive list of trees that we need.
Oh,
to
wait a
take
second.
down.
East of my driveway.
Excuse me. Let him finish his
Oh, okay, well,
presentation. If you have a question, put it
All
through
right.
me.
As far as hanging branches and widowmakers, I'm not aware that there are any that are a nuisance right now. We have identified like some that are back from the road allowance that, yeah, we will address on the list as we get to that. The culvert in question, there are quite a few leaves that are in that culvert. I can't say that the culvert was buried a foot below grade. That would be, I think, a little bit of an exaggeration. But we are gonna come along once the road's done. Once we surface treat the road, we will be coming along and cleaning up a few things. So there's some gravel in some of the ditches along there that did get pushed off in the wintertime when we were plowing because the road wasn't surface treated last year. So we will be addressing that in due time.
All right. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none. Thank you for your.
I still have a question. Ashes to the east of my driveway. Well, I don't think there is any. That's the ones they took down years ago.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I met with the road supervisor last week and we kind of went down there and he was under the impression the trees you were talking about where there's a stand-up ash tree is probably 50, 60 feet down to the east of your laneway along in the trees in that forested area there off to the side.
It's the big 100+ foot maples. Okay,
Mr. Boa,
sorry.
pose your questions through the chair, please. What was your question?
The question is, it's not really a question. I'm trying to say is I want the maples cut down and to the west of my driveway. Okay. There's very little, like, there wouldn't be like 3 trees on the other side on the east side of the driveway that make any difference at all. It's these 100-footers. And I picked up a branch the other day, 2 days ago. Okay. It had to be 15 feet long, that size around. And there's still tons of them up there. It's not safe.
Your complaints have been duly noted. They've been passed on to staff and they will deal with your complaints. Okay?
I don't know if my 10 minutes is up or not, but I find it a little strange that they would do the road first and then do the culvert. Like they did all the rest of the culverts all the way down the 6th line.
Right, what you've heard the answer from Mr. Tobin. And we are aware of your concerns and they will be dealt. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day.
We have question period now. 15 minutes, 1 question per person at a time on a rotating basis. Did we have any questions come through, Madam Clerk?
No questions.
Okay. We'll come back to the public meeting at 1:30. We're now moving on to our municipal officers and staff reports. And Lane is going to be talking to us about our asset management plan updates. Mr. Vance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, the report's provided to council at this meeting for information, but I do just want to take a few moments and go over some of the points in there. Council may have some questions. This report is an update report. It combines a number of areas as it relates to the annual plan update and the upcoming requirements under OREG 588-17. So we have this report. We've got the special meeting coming up next Tuesday, where we'll go over an updated plan and sections of what we hope to include in the final plan for the June 24th council meeting. So just to work through the report, a few comments there on state of local infrastructure. So one of our key documents in that is the completeness and confidence chart, and that establishes needs on an ongoing basis of where we need to do some additional work and things that are slated for attention. It kind of creates its own little work plan for asset management throughout the year. And as I noted in the report, in addition, just in terms of some of the discussions and some of the other things that we go through, we occasionally discover these additional little items that we didn't realize that we had. So unfortunately, in 2024, 25, we haven't really closed that gap on the completeness and confidence chart. We have captured more assets, and that's the goal, of course. And we've improved our data in a number of areas, but we're still working away on that chart. And realistically, the work on that chart never ends. It's something that will guide our work as we work through asset management, really from now into the future. Asset conditions change, and we need to ensure that we've got a good, fulsome system in place so that we can update that on an annual basis. And so something that maybe was moderate before in terms of a level of confidence or completeness may actually switch to a lower level if we haven't got a really good annual process for updating that. Likewise, as soon as we get good systems in place, we should see things gravitate to the high confidence level and high completeness level. The next section of the report deals with levels of service, and levels of service is an interesting term. We typically have two types. One would be a community measure, so something that ratepayers or the public would want or expect, or something that we maybe would propose to council, and you should expect that we can maintain the assets in a certain level. And the other are technical measures. That's typically what legislation either requires or allows us to track. And then we should be able to tie that back to a performance measure of some way. So the challenge is always the right combination of qualitative and quantitative measures so that we can track performance over time. And probably the best example of that is with respect to our core road infrastructure. So we've known for a number of years that our rating on our road system remains relatively high, but overall we are resurfacing fewer and fewer kilometers of roads every year, just based on the cost. So as that materializes, we would expect that should have an overall impact on our road quality. So if we just look at pavement condition index, that's a technical term, so the PCI rating, it still remains relatively high, but there'll be a certain point where all of a sudden the road base is going to start to deteriorate. And then we may have a large number of roads that are in a point where the surface is starting to break up. So we need to have those qualitative measures in balance with the quantitative measures so that we can make decisions for investment. And we will have more levels of service for some of the assets that are already identified in the plan, which we really before just identified, outlined how we maintain them, what our current performance is, but we hadn't really established a level of service. So we'll be looking at that in more detail next Tuesday. And the last point in the report is on the financing strategy. Of course, the existing asset management plan, section 8, includes various financing strategies that we have employed or are employing it here at the township. In the approved plan, it goes through all different components of the overall funding strategy. And so as outlined in that plan, and we'll hear more about it next week and then on the 24th, we need to somehow address the investment funding gap that exists. And so I think if you look at that investment chart, you'll see really across the board that we're underinvesting in a number of areas. One area, for instance, structures, we just found out within the last maybe 5 years that we actually had certain culverts that met the criteria of a structure. So they're greater than 3 meters and less than 6. Anything over 6 at this point, the county's responsible for. So because of that, we didn't have a sufficient reserve. We actually had to use a good section of the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund to complete the guide rail system for one of the structures. So that's one of those areas where we need to address that funding gap over the long term. We have, of course, implemented capital levies in other areas. Specifically this year, we implemented a capital levy specific to fire equipment. But what will be proposed in the final plan is different than that. The fire capital levy was basically one increase. We supplemented that with some UMP funding, and hereafter we'll only look at CPI increases. What I believe we need to do with respect to the ongoing capital levies is over a long-term capital planning cycle. So I've laid out really between 5 years and 10 years. That we would need a sustained capital levy each of those years over that period of time. So some of those areas I think that we would be able to demonstrate then to council is where are we going to see the return on that investment. Roads capital, which I just mentioned before. We have a number of our sidewalks which we would classify as poor condition, which I think based on our strat plan and the issue of connectivity in our township, we should move that from poor up to the next level. So we'd have some sidewalk improvements to make there. Works equipment, which we're still in the midst of trying to figure out that report and where we go. structures, as I mentioned, stormwater, and stormwater ponds. And we are just starting to grapple with parks properties and the related assets that are on parks properties. So if we looked at, say, a playground, for instance, we do set aside a small amount of money for a playground reserve, but in terms of actually being able to replace a piece of playground equipment or make any investments in those playground equipments, the level of funding is very small. So the other point of what we would do is we present these capital increases very distinct from the annual operating tax increases. So we laid out in such a way that it's very clear that this, whether it's a 2% or $200,000 or whatever that number is going to be as a capital levy, then any other operating levies with respect to remuneration, inflationary pressures, cost of operations, those types of things would be separate. So it'd be very clear when it comes to the council table at budget time. So that's a general overview of what I hope to convey to council in this report and what we'll be talking about next week. The updated plan will include this type of a framework. In the existing plan of record, there are some figures that still relate back to 2022, some relate to 2024. So the goal is that when the updated plan is brought forward, I'm hoping to have all that completed by next week, but if not, any of those sections would be updated for the 24th. They will all be the 2025 asset management plan that council would be taking a look at and improving. And of course, as I mentioned before, the work doesn't really stop there. It just, it kind of meets a target and then we continue to work through the work plan as we go. But I'd be available to respond to any questions council may have.
Right, so we're being asked to receive this report. We are going to get additional information. Is this your way of kind of breaking it to us gently?
Shout out to you, Madam Mayor. The Section 8 actually has this outlined already. It's just kind of brings a little bit more to the forefront. And then once again, next Tuesday will be a little bit more in terms of overall charts and some of the layout of what we can expect. I think as we'd outlined before to council, we need about an additional $1 million a year in terms of capital investment. And so as with a combination of capital levy, grants, unconditional and conditional reserves, those types of things that we can kind of start to phase that in. And I mentioned the long-term planning horizon of 5 years or 10 years. So 5 years would be to get us to the next asset management plan rewrite, because we have to basically do a rewrite every 5 years. Annual updates in between, but an annual rewrite every 5. And then 10 years is the actual planning horizon of what's outlined in the Ontario regulation.
Are there any questions, Councillor Boyko?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sanis. I'm really looking forward to the conversation on Tuesday, and I read with interest all that you wrote in this report. I want to go to a particular paragraph on page 3, right above the subtitle where it says financing strategy. Because in any report, I always look for not only the detail of the report, but the underlying principle. And this seems to be an underlying principle that we are considering changing. I'll read it so you know what I'm talking about. It says, overall, we need a switch in thinking so that assets are seen as a means of delivering approved levels of service rather than infrastructure that needs to be maintained or replaced. So a switch in thinking. So I'm asking, I guess, for a comment on your thoughts on that switch in thinking. It says, once again, the Selwyn AMP needs to mature before this linkage can truly be made. So maybe you can comment what you mean by it needs to mature. So perhaps you can talk about the underlying principle that seems to be changing the way we used to think about this and the way we are going to be thinking about this.
Sure. To you, Madam Mayor. It is in taking a look at levels of service, it's a different way of justifying investments in that infrastructure. So it's, if you looked at a piece of equipment and we came to you with a proposal and said we need to invest $50,000 in this piece of equipment, we could probably lay out in very granular detail why we needed that $50,000. What the asset management plan attempts to do, and as I mentioned, ours needs to mature to be able to do that, is to be able to demonstrate to council that if we don't have that $50,000 investment in that piece of equipment, then we can't maintain the sidewalks in the way that council expects or that the public expects. Or that we can't complete that additional kilometer of road to meet our target of 20 kilometers a year, that type of thing. Which would then have an impact on our level of service. So that's that relationship, and it's like I haven't got a really clear linear path yet how to get there. But it's the discussion that we are having and have had, and that's where I just mentioned that maturity level for our plan. It needs to get to a point where we're looking at those investments not as how do we maintain this piece of equipment, but how do we invest in that piece of equipment so that we can then provide the level
The
of service.
service. Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Black?
Yeah, thanks for the report. I mean, very substantial amount of work has already been put into the asset management plan. Really, if you look at page 71, it's the analysis of existing investment gas. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the numbers. And clearly roads is the biggest investment we have. No different than the county, big roads are very expensive. So you've got the estimated 10-year annual maintenance required, 13,422. Is that 13 million over 10 years?
Yeah, that's the total for the 10-year investment. Yeah.
And then the 10-year, that's 9,600, so 900,000 a year. Average. 9,600,000 over 10. So again, is that a
For
10-year
the-
number?
For that one, I think for the capital, I think it's a different one. Because we have a number of roads which are supposed to be asphalt surface and not tar and chip. I can clarify that for sure. I can understand where the wording there maybe doesn't just
Yeah,
tie in.
just
Yeah.
Not 100% clear.
Mhm.
Financial impacts are the most important one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So if you could maybe for next week, rather than me ask much more questions.
Yeah.
Is clarify the headings, so we understand what it means. The other thing that, we did the road tour, or the infrastructure tour with the county last week, and it was really informative. It might be a question for Adam, Mr. Cohen rather, but, they're using this microsurfacing over tar and chip now, as an option. And I guess getting a lot of success with it. I think they're believing that it is extending the road surface and all those sorts of things. So when we went through the plan and talked about the roads, we talked about microservicing, we talked about tar and chip gravel and asphalt. Is that something that we're considering in the plan as well? To try and extend the life of the tar and chip roads. It looks like an asphalt surface once.
Yeah.
It's done as microservice.
Yeah, definitely. I'll let Adam speak to that for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, through you, Madam Mayor. We do have a microsurfacing program right now. Currently, we're doing asphalt roads, so we're making our way through the township and the urban areas, microsurfacing asphalt roads. Microsurface over surface treatment has been done. I think OSM's been doing it for quite a while. They'll do a double course of surface treatment. Then the following year, micro. The problem is if you do like a double lift of micro, is about twice as much as a single lift of surface treatment. So it's substantially more money to do it that way, right? So right now, we're currently doing single surface over existing roads that are surface treated and are still in decent shape to try to protect the good roads. If we wanted to micro that, it would cost twice as much money essentially to do micro over that surface treated road.
As far as the life cycle, what's the difference in life cycle then if you do that? You know, it's more expensive on the front end. We have what they were saying, now it's more expensive on the front end, but it extends the life of the road rather than another route partnership.
Yeah, I think it would depend on the road for sure and the volume of traffic that's going over it. I think micro, they say 10 to 12 years, depending. So, I mean, time will tell. We'll see how the county makes it with it. If it does prove that it's a benefit to doing that, then maybe it's something we can look at, but I don't know if we want to be the front runner in that gamble yet.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, then I need someone to receive the report. Councillor Koulis, seconded by Councillor Boyko, all in favor. It's carried. Thank you. We have 5 minutes before our public meeting, so Pear, how quick can you talk?
I don't know if I can squeeze that much in.
We can start it, and if we have to
right.
halt it for a bit, we can do that because you're doing the public meeting as well, so.
Yep. So thank you, Your Worship. So I'm gonna do a quick summary of Bill 17 that was recently passed by the legislature. I'll cover off the Planning Act portion, and if there's any questions regarding the Building Code Act or the Development Charges component to Bill 17, I'll pass those off to Robert and Lane. So Bill 17 is the province's latest response to the housing crisis. As I said, it received royal assent on June 5th last week. However, the Environmental Registry of Ontario postings are still open for comment until June 11th for the Act and to June 26th for the two proposed regulations under the Act. So with regard to the significant changes proposed by the bill, the first one is a policy regarding school sites, and that no parcels of urban residential land shall be prohibited for school sites within residential areas. Generally, our comment for this is that no concern. Our new official plan actually addresses with this particular component, and as soon as we get our new official plan, we'll be into the revision of our zoning bylaw, and it will reflect exactly what is proposed under the Planning Act here. So no concern under that issue. Minor variances, they're proposing to have an automatic variance, and the amount of the variance would be prescribed by regulation. It's proposed to be at 10%, but that's pending whatever the approved regulation is. This automatic variance would only affect Lakefield as a service settlement area. It does not affect our rural areas at all. I generally don't have a concern with that, with the qualification that such a variance would not have any adverse impact to that neighboring property, and they could, I mean, it's hard to crystal ball on a site specific basis what those adverse impact might be, but that would be my only concern is, you know, don't have something automatic that builder can use then that may cause an impact to the neighboring property, right? There's a section under the bill that deals with the approved bill that deals with information requirements under the Planning Act, and which specific studies can be submitted as part of a complete application. This is the type of thing that would be determined at a pre-consultation stage of the process. And so in order to streamline the process, the province is proposing that only certain studies or reports or plans would be eligible to be submitted for an application under the Planning Act. Specifically cited as to be excluded, they're proposing the regulation would exclude sun shadow studies, wind studies, urban design, and lighting studies. With regard to those, I don't have a particular any concern because within Peterborough County and here in Sullivan, those studies have not been used to any extent that I'm aware of. And then they're still looking for comments on which type of reports that we would be looking to wanting to see under the regulations. So I provided a list of those, and all of those reports that we do request have some relationship to the provincial planning statement to satisfy our provincial policy regarding matters of provincial interest, right? So those reports would be like things like a planning justification report, archaeological assessments, hydrological assessments, functional servicing reports, environmental impact studies, traffic studies, stormwater management plans, and land use compatibility studies, agricultural impact assessment, geotechnical reports, records of site conditions, and MDS calculations. Which of these reports would be required for any particular application depends on the scale of it and where it's located. And again, these would be determined at pre-consultation stage as to which ones any particular developer would need to submit as part of a complete application. Moving on then to how are we doing for time?
Sure.
To keep going.
Yeah, keep going for, but
Okay.
will it kill us if we 35, Madam Clerk?
Through you, I won't kill you, but that's up to council.
You let them carry on, and go with the public meeting. Okay,
Might keep going?
yep,
Okay. There's also a regulation dealing with, the legislation is gonna only accept, basically states that any applications that's submitted by a qualified person are to be accepted by a municipality. I don't think I fully understand what the intent of this particular piece of legislation is, or what the intent is. If the intent is merely to state that a report is to be prepared by a qualified person, we don't have any objection with that. That's sort of been standard norm for the township and the county for ages, right? That we would expect that a report be prepared by somebody qualified. If it's more to deal with the peer review aspect of it, we would have a concern with that. If the legislation intends that is to eliminate the peer review component, we would have a big concern with that, because we'd obviously want to have, our own merit review or peer review of those documents before issuing any approvals. We'll see how it all plays out. The regulations underneath this particular section of the Planning Act may provide some clarity. But the biggest concern being if that component if the intent is to remove peer review. So that's the biggest concern with that particular piece of that section under the bill that's been approved. Yeah, just for council's awareness, you may be aware that we changed the time of when we do the peer review. Right now, we're doing peer review before we consider an application complete. We put that change into effect as a result of some of the previous bills that introduced refund provisions if an application wasn't decided upon within a certain time frame after being deemed complete. If we move it back, if the legislation is intended that we move the peer review back to after we deem an application incomplete, that's fine, but then you still open up the door to potentially developers appealing on the basis of non-decision within the prescribed time frame. So that's sort of neither here nor there, but it does open up, the Ontario Land Tribunal maybe with, Ontario-wide may end up with a lot more cases before them, right? For that particular type of appeal. Then there was finally there's something in regard to minister zoning orders that they can require development agreement relating to conditions be entered into between the owner and the minister or the municipality, and that's strictly within a minister's purview, which does not really have any bearing on the local department here, so I have no concern with that one. Well, those are my comments regarding the Planning Act. I don't know if we want to move on to Building Code Act or Development Charges Act.
I think maybe we should deal with it, but let's deal with this report now, and then we'll go to Robert.
Through Mayor Senes, the changes that were made to the Building Code Act focus on two areas. In Canada, we have two approval bodies for innovative construction materials, one being the national body, the Canadian Construction Materials Center, and one being the provincial body, being the Building Materials Evaluation Committee. This change to the Act aims to streamline approvals when innovative construction materials were previously approved by the national body, being the Canadian Construction Materials Center. They had to go through an additional approval at the provincial level and obtain a minister's ruling in order for those approvals to be brought in to be utilized within the Ontario Building Code. So that change eliminates that duplicity for innovative construction materials. And additionally, the bill has some proposed changes to the regulations, under the Municipal Act and the City of Toronto Act, which aim to prevent municipalities from passing bylaws that supersede provincial building standards and to eliminate conflicts between the building code and perceived preferential municipal standards.
I think a good example of what you just described is the new build that's happening in Keene with Cormor, where they're using materials that haven't been used in the past to build a house. And so these things do exist. And I believe that the building permit was issued by the municipality of OSM. Might not have necessarily happened in another township because they wanted to stick strictly by the building code, and it was new materials that they weren't familiar with. So maybe that's dealing with that. I'm not quite sure. Development charges is something that's really concerning because they're saying in this bill that in the past, townships could receive development charges at the time of issuing a building permit. Now it's not going to be until occupancy. And so the house will be built, people will be moving in, and then you can go after the development charges. And I don't quite know how that's going to protect us as a township with that change. Am I correct, Robert?
Through your mayor, I think it'd be more appropriate for Lane to chime in on some of
Lane.
this.
Sure. To you, Madam Mayor, definitely the changes in the act, there were some good changes that our industry partners had worked with the province on. But yeah, there's a lot of deferrals, a lot of exemptions, things that the municipality is no longer able to charge interest on a deferral. And to your point, once the house is built and somebody's ready to move in, then you're trying to go back and collect development charge. It's definitely starting to erode the phrase growth pays for growth. And there's a number of areas, if you dig deeper into that bill, where the municipality would be required to fund some of the necessary infrastructure upgrades from other municipal sources, so not from development charges. So, which basically means our reserves or our ratepayers that would be paying for that development. So yeah, there is definitely some areas of concern. And the other is just the ongoing addition of administrative burden to the municipality, because now we have to track those things. And when push comes to shove on a payment, it would be up to us to prove that this is what the individual owes, as opposed to if they pay up front, you say, here's what it is right now, pay it, and no issues, right? Yeah, so there's some concerns there for sure. The great thing is that our consultant is an industry leader, and they have provided comments to the province on this. So hopefully they'll have an impact on the regulations, even though the bill has been approved.
Because the bill has been passed already, and but we're making comments, maybe that can help form the regulations with the province. I have a little, and I'll say it. Any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through your mayor. Yeah, I think it's an interesting bill for sure, and I think it's a result of a pendulum swing really that's gone many people view too far as far as the cost of building these days, the cost of studies, peer review, development charges, building permits, and some municipalities up to 30% of the cost of building homes. So I think there's many parts of the bill that I like, there's many parts that I don't. But I think it's a result of those climbing costs over the years. The municipality and staff have a responsibility to limit liability for the municipality. So certain studies, those sort of things are absolutely necessary, particularly if the municipality is going to be taking over part of the development, i.e. the roads or ponds, those sort of things. Certainly, the studies need to be adequate, but certainly it has to have a balanced approach to the necessary studies need to be requested in the pre-consultation. Anything that is unnecessary really, what's on the list. I think we have to be careful on what we're asking for and whether it's needed. The issue around qualified persons and studies, obviously, developers, property owners get professional engineers engineers to provide their study, their drawings on stormwater management, those sorts of things. And again, you know, these are qualified individuals that are responsible to professional organizations that have licensing and so on. So again, you know, when peer review is being asked, that peer review should be scoped to the number of issues that the township might be concerned about. And to, again, to reduce costs, in some cases, developments have had 4 and 5 different levels of peer review. Each one of those adds about 6 months to the timing of the development. We've seen an element that, and that's not always obviously the township's fault. The developers sometimes don't provide the information as requested, and so it's the shared responsibility for the length of how long it takes to get something approved. So really, the issue around development charges is I had a lot of concerns around that. The word occupancy can mean a lot of different things to people. I would hope it would happen on the sale of the property and the lawyer would left the development charges for the township. So we wouldn't have to do as much tracking and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping that the legislation actually will show that it's on the sale of the house and the development tax that the development charges automatically are submitted to the township at that point. We're not having to chase the property owner at that point probably for the development charges. So those are just my comments. I do believe that the legislation has good pieces and not so good pieces, but I think it is trying to address the increasing costs of putting housing. And if the municipality wants to be a partner in developing the housing, then we have to take some of the risk and some of the responsibility for some of the costs as well. So all I'm saying is we got to balance.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Senes. I've lived in a number of countries throughout Central America and the Caribbean, and I know some countries allow people to take occupancy within a residence, and the residency actually never is completed. If you've traveled, you may have noticed a lot of buildings with rebar sticking out of it, and clearly there's been someone living in the building for decades, if not generations. Is there any chance that this Bill 17 could potentially see the township in a position where we are trying to collect on our development charges, whereas someone has occupied the residence, however, it's quote unquote still under construction for an unspecified or indefinite period of time? Would that impact our abilities to be collecting our charges?
Through you, Mayor Senes, we already struggle with people occupying buildings without occupancy. It's an ongoing fight. It's been something municipalities have dealt with for a very long time. Typically, when a home is built by a home builder, you have a much higher chance of the occupancy being completed properly. But when individuals take on the responsibility and act as their own builder, many times the inspections aren't called for, and we have laying permits that are open, and it's possible because work's not completed, but it's something probably all municipalities in Ontario already struggle with.
Any other questions? If not, we have a motion before us to receive the information and that staff provide a copy of the report to the Ontario government. Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Here, we will now go on to our public meeting. So this is a public meeting with the zoning bylaw amendment. Turned over to our planner.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Council of Township of Sullivan is holding a public meeting in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act in order to consider one application for zoning amendment today. The prescribed notice of public meeting was provided via prepaid first-class mail to all residents within 120-meter radius of the subject property, as well as by a sign posted on the subject land. The notices were also available on the county and, just on the township website. The notice circulation complies with the requirements of the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Township of Selwyn, but does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Selwyn in respect of the zoning amendment before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval to the zoning amendment, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the council of the Township of Sullivan in respect of the proposed zoning amendment before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval to the zoning amendment, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to do so. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the council, the Township of Sullivan in respect of the proposed amendment, you must make written requests to the Township of Sullivan, providing your name and address or email address. So the application today, as you said, is for file, it's C02-2425, and this is for 1277 Man Road. Specifically, the subject property is currently zoned development D zone for about half of the property and residential type 1 for the front half of the property. The landowner is looking to develop the site with a second unit within the portion of the property that's currently zoned D. D does not permit any future development. It's sort of a holding pattern, awaiting a future development plan. We're also doing a site-specific zoning amendment for this to an R1 exception 623 to allow a greater separation distance between the principal dwelling and the second unit than is otherwise provided for under the township zoning regulations. We're moving from the typical 30-meter separation to a maximum of 50-meter separation. I find that the application is consistent with the provincial planning statement. It does conform with our official plan. I do recommend the zoning amendment for approval. We also have comments of no concern from the Tonabee Region Conservation Authority, Enbridge, Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board, and County Public Works. And it's a relatively straight zoning amendment. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you very much. And I understand that the applicant Corey Newman is on the line. Mr. Newman, do you have anything you wish to add to the planner's comments?
No, I don't believe so. Just the fact.
You're muted.
Oh, is it unmuted now? Can you hear me? Can't hear.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I don't know. You can't hear me. Oh man.
Can we help him on our end?
You guys can't hear me?
I heard you.
You do hear me?
I do. As Mr. Newman, do you have anything you wish to add to the planner's report?
I don't really think so. No, the report's all good. I approve all that. It's good. Just the fact that I don't know why this property is zoned half of it development and my neighbor's properties, and that we weren't notified about it. It's just a little bit frustrating that we have to go through this process before we can actually put a foundation in the ground. Like, it's just, yeah, no one knew about this until I actually applied for this. So that's about it. That's my only big concern, really. It's just really setting everything back. That's all.
Is there anyone else that's here in favor of the application?
There's no one else virtually here for this application.
Okay. Either for or against? Absolutely. Can we get an answer for Mr. Newman?
Yeah, with regard to the development D zone, we addressed this in conversation with the applicant at the time of pre-consultation. The development D zone was placed on the property as at the last comprehensive review of the township zoning bylaw. There was the option that I'll say that we have noted the development D zone is present at this site and the neighbors' 5 sites on Longman Road. There's also another section along along Ward Street where there's some individually owned properties, some smaller ones that have a D zone on them. just through a search of township records, we were unable to locate rationale for the development zone at the time of the last comprehensive review. We're certainly open to reviewing that again when we get to around to our comprehensive review. And it may be that we'll remove those going forward. However, ahead of comprehensive review, the way to address this is through a site-specific zoning amendment, such as we're going through right now.
Right, thank you. I'll bring it to council. Are there any questions? Yes.
No. Okay to speak about this. So
Up at the microphone, I need your name and your address, sir.
Hey, my name's Gary Hutz. I have the property that's to the south side of Mr. Newman. And the one, I'm not going to argue anything about allowing a granny suite in the back there because the province is all for it. And my big question about this, and Pear's brought it up, is about this development. That zoning, we built there many years ago, and that back half was always agriculture. And it's been like that for years. And I, for one, never got notified about any of this change. As a matter of fact, I have a tree line there, and they moved the development right to the tree line. It wasn't even the agriculture, so they've encroached on my R1 zoning. So I have a concern that even for Corey, I don't see why he should even have to pay for that development property, because none of us were even notified about this stuff. So I have no idea why somebody would even do that. It doesn't make any sense. And this goes back to 2009, I think, Pear?
Through your worship. Yeah, so like I said, again, the development D zone was placed on these properties and a number of other ones as at time of comprehensive review, which was approved in 2009.
Yeah, so
I guess what I'm getting at is if I want to go ahead and put in a granny suite, then I'm going to have to go through this same process again, which I don't agree with. I don't think that development property should even exist there. It should be actually R or A1. As a matter of fact, with A1 zoning, I could even put in a larger granny suite because it's 60% instead of the 40%.
right, yeah. So we did hear from Kara that when our official plan is approved, that we will be going through the zoning again, and that could be reversed. And then you wouldn't have to worry about that. Unfortunately, we've got Mr. Newman caught in this today. So, yeah.
That's really, I'm not going to object to any of this, so.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Now I'll bring it to Councillor Henry.
Thank you, through Mayor Senes. Now, as a member of council, we're supposed to come in here educated and have an understanding and prepared for the topics that are before us. And this was a tough one for me because I did have conversations beforehand with people, and I was told to my questions, I don't know. So when asked, why was this made a development zoning? The answers I got were, I don't know. Dr. County, we don't know. This is a little bit challenging for me to be able to accept. And that the fact that the properties which were zoned R1, all of a sudden half their property was designated for development. I find it very confusing. And why the property owners weren't even informed about this. I've had a number of complaints come in about this now. And basically the questions that I'm asking are the questions that the ratepayers were asking of me. How could this have gone through without the ratepayers' knowledge? Who applied for it? I understand that, maybe 1 to 3 years from now, we'll be able to fix this situation. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to do anything, they're looking at, I believe Mr. Newman's around the $7,000 mark right now, approximately $3,000 of which was because of having to change this zoning back to what it originally existed as. Yet we just finished discussing Bill 17 of how much easier this is going to be. I'm just very confused, and quite frankly, the timing of this coming through, I'm cautious, but there seems to be some hypocrisy in the conversation at this point. I understand that bills and laws come in at certain times, and it will have impacts on things, but it's impacting a number of people there, and it is impacting development in a area that is allowed to do it. So I still want to ask, why was this put on the property originally, the D-zoning, and who did it? Because if we don't have an answer for that, I don't see how we can enforce something that we don't know or let alone understand.
Rob Kelly.
Through you, Mayor Senes, although Per and I were unable to locate the specifics as to why that D zone was applied, when the comprehensive zoning review was done in 2008 into 2009, it'd be reasonable to expect that land zoned agricultural would be switched to a more appropriate zoning, and the D zone may have been that. We certainly don't want people in built up areas operating agricultural operations that could definitely negatively impact the area. The notice would have been done through public notice via the newspaper ads in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. So not every individual property owner that's affected by comprehensive zoning review gets a individualized notice. That would be unreasonable expectation, that amount of workload, especially when like this was after the amalgamation, right? The first true Selwyn zoning bylaw, or Smith and Small Lakefield bylaw at the time. So hopefully that helps answer those questions.
Do you have another question, Councillor Henry, or?
Thank you, through you. No, I do not have another question. I'm just as perplexed, though. Thank you.
Understandable. Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. You know, I think back then there was a lot of talk about increasing density within built up areas. So a lot of large lots, I think, were had development zones put on them. A lot that I'm involved in happened there. We needed both an official plan and a rezoning on that piece as well. So I think that was maybe part of it, trying to look at lots that could have more density put on them. But you know, the minimum notice thing, I think, needs to get looked at, because if somebody is changing a zoning on your property, and you don't know about it, I think that's a problem. So there'll be extra cost to that, but it'll avoid situations like this maybe down the road. So I think in a lot of cases, we have to go past beyond the minimum requirement for notification, particularly in this situation where 5 property owners here have a D zone on their property that they didn't know existed until they apply for something. So that's just a comment. I do have a question for Rob with respect to septic systems and wells for secondary units. I see on the site plan there is a septic system plotted. I don't see a well plotted. What is typical, or is it vary based on particular requirement for separate well or a separate septic?
Through you, Mayor Senes, with regard to sewage systems, they're highly regulated through the Ontario Building Code, so we have to ensure compliance with that. In this case, it's most appropriate to add an additional sewage system. In some cases, they can be combined into a single system, depending on the configuration of the lot and the way things are planned out. With regard to wells, they're not specifically as well regulated beyond setbacks to sewage systems, and in some cases, secondary suite will be serviced with the existing water service at the principal residence, but there is considerations that have to be taken when that approach is looked upon.
Thank you.
Right, are there any other questions? I think when we go through the rezoning, or whatever you call it, the upgrading of our zoning bylaws, after the official plan is approved, we can look at the notices and change those. Council has the ability to do that. Doesn't help the situation today. I'm sorry, but you know, we can improve things. Anyway, we do have this recommendation before us, and I'm looking for someone to move it. Councillor Henry is moving it. Councillor Boyko seconding it. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much. It's been approved, Mr. Newman. Right, we are moving to our next item on the agenda is Megan LaRock.
Through you, Madam Mayor, my report is on the draft 2025 Council Communicator. As you know, it is an 8-page tabloid style newsletter or newspaper that is mailed out to all of the residents in our township. So I'm just looking for feedback from council members before it goes out, I believe at late June.
Okay. Everybody had a chance. We were supposed to get one, but
Yeah, I did send an email. We did try to print it, but the printer was offline, so.
any comments? I think you did a really good job pulling everything together as to what's happened over the past year. People look for this in their mail, and we'd like some copies to take with us to AMO. Just make a note of that. Anybody else have anything to say?
Yeah, through you, Mary. Yeah, no, I thought it was excellent. I think it's there are fewer pictures of members of council in it, which I think is not a bad thing. We're getting fewer and fewer each year, which is great. No, I think the content is the most important thing, obviously, and there was lots of good content in there that let ratepayers know where the money is being spent. I would like some extra copies as I meet groups and so on to share all the achievements of the township. So it's a great report. Thank you.
So I need someone to move to receive the report. Councillor Koulas and Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. We have consent items. Is there anything anyone wants to hold? If not, I look for someone to approve the consent items before us. Councillor Boyko, seconded by Councillor Henry, in favor. It's carried. Thank you. Is under other new and unfinished business. Do we have any new business? Okay. We are going to go into closed. So I need someone to move that, please. Councillor Koulas, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I've already moved going to close, so sorry. So tell me I'm wrong to put it. I'm sorry.